The ballroom shimmered like a dream. Chandeliers spilled golden light across a sea of gowns and tuxedos, the air thick with the scent of champagne and roses. Tonight wasn't just another Manhattan charity gala. It was the night Ethan Ward, heir to the Ward and Co. empire, would change his life forever. Ethan adjusted his cufflinks, the Ward family crest blinking under the lights. He stood tall, his tailored black suit molded to his broad shoulders, but his still gray eyes betrayed flicker of nerves. For a man who had faced boardrooms filled with billionaires and walked away unshaken, this moment was different. This wasn't about business. This was about love, or at least what he believed was love. Melissa Hart was radiant. Her emerald green gown hugged every curve, her auburn hair cascading in waves that seemed to glow beneath the chandeliers. She was beautiful in the way society pages adored, polished, poised, the perfect complement to Ethan's measured strength. For 2 years she had been by his side, through charity events, business dinners, long nights when stress weighed heavy. To Ethan, she wasn't just his girlfriend, she was his anchor. The orchestra's melodies shifted, swelling into a soft, romantic tune. A murmur rippled through the crowd as Ethan stepped toward the stage. He could feel every eye on him, investors, journalists, socialites waiting for another headline. But for once he didn't care. His gaze locked on Melissa. He reached the stage, microphone in hand, and the room hushed. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ethan's deep voice resonated, calm yet warm. "Tonight isn't just about raising money for those in need. Tonight is about gratitude. Gratitude for the people who stand by us when the spotlight fades. For me, that person is one very special woman." Melissa's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes glistening. Gasps rose from the crowd. Ethan descended from the stage, the velvet box burning in his pocket. He stopped before Melissa, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Slowly, he lowered to one knee. "Melissa Hart," he said, his voice steady though his heart thundered, "will you marry me?" Cameras exploded like fireworks. The crowd leaned forward, hungry for the moment. Melissa pressed her hands to her chest, tears spilling down her cheeks. She nodded quickly, joy, or what looked like joy, etched on her face. "Yes, of course, yes," she cried, her voice breaking with emotion. The ballroom erupted, applause thundered, champagne glasses clinked, and photographers surged forward. Ethan slipped the diamond ring onto her finger, rising to sweep her into his arms. For a moment, everything was perfect. But perfection has cracks, tiny, almost invisible, unless you know where to look. As Ethan kissed Melissa's cheek, the cameras catching every angle, her eyes darted across the room. For the briefest second they lingered, not on Ethan, but on a man in the far corner. Adrian Cross. Tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, Adrian was known for his ruthless instincts in business and his magnetic charm in social circles. Tonight he raised his glass toward Melissa with the faintest smirk. She gave the tiniest nod, so subtle it could have been missed, almost. Ethan didn't see it. He was too caught in the roar of applause, the rush of adrenaline, the joy he believed was real. But the cameras caught it. A photographer's lens froze that fleeting glance, capturing a secret in plain sight. "Let's hear it for the future Mr. and Mrs. Ward," the gala host boomed. The crowd cheered louder, drowning out the quiet storm brewing beneath the glittering surface. Ethan held Melissa's hand high, smiling like a man who thought he had everything. And Melissa smiled back, the perfect fiancée, perfect except for that one look. As the night carried on, Ethan was showered with congratulations. Investors clapped him on the back, socialites gushed over the ring. His phone buzzed with notifications, news outlets already blasting headlines, Ward heir engaged. But in the corner of the ballroom, Adrian Cross slipped away unnoticed, his glass of champagne untouched. Melissa's eyes followed him briefly before returning to Ethan, her fingers tightening around his arm as if to keep him close. For Ethan, the night felt like victory. For Melissa, it was the beginning of something else entirely. And in the shadows of Manhattan's high society, whispers had already begun. Later that night, long after the gala lights dimmed, Ethan's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Congratulations on your engagement. Too bad your fiancé spent last night at the Larchmont Hotel with another man." Attached was a grainy photo, Melissa, her unmistakable silhouette, walking into the hotel beside a tall figure. Ethan froze, his jaw clenched, but his eyes narrowed with controlled fire. He wasn't a man who broke easily. "No," he muttered to himself. "Not Melissa." But doubt had already slipped its dagger into his heart. And so begins the war between truth and betrayal. The city lights outside Ethan Ward's penthouse blurred into streaks as he read the anonymous text again and again, the words refusing to vanish no matter how many times he blinked. She's not who you think. Melissa has betrayed you. Tonight, Hotel Astoria, Suite 1403. He tossed the phone onto the glass table as though distance could weaken it. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the skyline beyond his windows. Ethan ran a hand down his face, trying to suppress the bitter thought rising inside him. Melissa Hart, his fiancée, the woman who had laughed with him at the gala, her hand resting so naturally in his. The woman he had once believed was his safe harbor amid the storms of family legacy. Could she really? No, his chest tightened with resistance. He'd known her for years. He'd detrusted her with pieces of himself he never shared with anyone else. Strangers with burner phones didn't get to redefine his life. And yet beneath that denial, another voice whispered, "Why does it sound possible?" Ethan paced the length of the living room, his footsteps sharp against the polished floor. He remembered Melissa's late-night charity meetings, her vague explanations for missed dinners, the quick silencing of her phone whenever he entered the room. At the time, he dismissed them as the quirks of a woman under pressure. Now, each fragment fell into place like shards of glass rearranging themselves into a weapon. The rage that threatened to consume him was steadied by one decision. He would not be played like a fool in the dark. He would go to her, tonight. Melissa's apartment overlooked Central Park, a place that looked almost like a fairy tale in winter light. Ethan arrived unannounced, his knock firm enough to rattle the heavy oak door. When she opened it, surprise flashed across her face, quickly smoothed into a smile. "Ethan," she said warmly, her auburn hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders. "This is unexpected." "I needed to see you," he said simply. She ushered him inside, where candles flickered on a marble counter, their glow bouncing off crystal glasses. A half-empty bottle of wine stood nearby. Melissa lifted it as though to explain. "A quiet evening. I didn't think I'd see you until tomorrow." Ethan didn't answer. He crossed the room, stopping at the window where city lights glittered below. His reflection looked foreign harder. He turned back to her. "Melissa, I received a message tonight. Someone claims you were with another man at the Astoria." Her glass stilled halfway to her lips. She lowered it slowly, eyes wide. "What?" Ethan's voice was calm, but still threaded through it. "Suite 1403, they were specific." She stared at him, then set the glass down with deliberate care. "So this is what it comes to, you listening to faceless cowards who send you poison on your phone." "I didn't want to believe it," Ethan said, "but I had to ask you." Melissa stepped closer, her expression trembling between offense and hurt. "Do you think so little of me, that after everything we've built, I would risk it all for what? Some stranger?" The words pierced, but Ethan watched her eyes, not her lips. They shone with unshed tears, yet something about the timing of them felt rehearsed. Still, his heart ached at the sight. He had loved her once, perhaps still did. The line between love and disillusion blurred until it made his head spin. "Melissa," he said quietly, "look at me and tell me there's nothing." She held his gaze. "There's nothing, Ethan. You're the man I love, the only man." She reached up, resting a hand against his cheek. "If people are trying to tear us apart, it's because they envy us. Don't let them win." For a moment, he almost believed her. Her touch was warm, her voice threaded with conviction. It would have been easier, so much easier, to surrender to the comfort of her denial, to close the door on suspicion and return to the dream of a future together. But as she leaned into him, her eyes flickered. A tiny break, a flash of guilt buried deep. It lasted less than a second, but Ethan saw it, and once seen, it could not be unseen. He forced a faint smile, covering her hand with his. "I don't want to doubt you." "Then don't," she whispered. "Trust me." Trust, the word sounded like glass beneath his feet, fragile, ready to shatter. Later that night, back in his penthouse, Ethan stood at the window again, the city humming beneath him. Melissa's words replayed in his head, soft and pleading. "You're the man I love, the only man." If only her eyes had agreed. At the window again, the city humming beneath him. Melissa's words replayed in his head, soft and pleading. "You're the man I love, the only man." If only her eyes had agreed. He poured a drink, but barely touched it. His phone lay on the table, dark and silent now. No new messages. Whoever had sent the first one had vanished back into the shadows, leaving Ethan with nothing but doubt gnawing at his ribs. His mind turned restless, assembling fragments into possibilities. If Melissa was lying, who was the man in that hotel suite? Why would someone risk exposing it to him? Was this about love, or about Ward & Co., the empire waiting at his fingertips? The questions coiled tighter until they left no air. Ethan pressed his palms against the glass, his reflection staring back, eyes shadowed with betrayal yet not broken. He would not break. If Melissa thought her denial had closed the book, she was wrong. This was only chapter 1. Because beneath the ache and the anger, one truth had taken root. Melissa was hiding something, and Ethan Ward would find out what it was. Ethan's phone vibrated suddenly, rattling against the glass table. He snatched it up, heart hammering. No name, no number, just a single photo message. Melissa in the lobby of the Astoria. Her hand linked with another man, their heads bent close as though sharing a dangerous secret. The caption read, "Do you still believe her?" Ethan's grip tightened until the glass threatened to crack. Whatever denial had lingered inside him died in that instant. The war for truth had begun. The photo burned into Ethan Ward's vision long after the phone went dark. Melissa's face, tilted toward another man in the Astoria lobby, caught mid-laugh, her hand resting on his arm. Intimacy radiated from the image, an intimacy Ethan had once thought was his alone. The caption beneath it felt like a knife. "Do you still believe her?" Ethan stood frozen in his penthouse, the city sprawling beneath him like a kingdom he no longer recognized. He had faced hostile boards, scandal-hungry press, and the crushing expectations of his family name. None of it had ever left him trembling the way this photo did. It wasn't just betrayal, it was confirmation. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid trembling as it caught the light. He didn't drink it. Instead, he set it down untouched, his hands gripping the counter until his knuckles whitened. For the first time, Ethan allowed himself to say the words aloud. She lied. The sound of it filled the empty room, raw and undeniable. By morning, the photo was still on his phone, impossible to delete. Ethan dressed sharply, as though armor could disguise the wounds beneath, and headed to the Astoria. If the photo was real, the hotel might still carry traces of the night Melissa claimed never happened. The lobby smelled faintly of polished wood and lilies, its chandeliers gleaming with disinterested grandeur. Guests checked in, bellboys carted luggage, life moved forward as though no empires were unraveling within its walls. Ethan approached the front desk. "Ethan Ward," he said, sliding a black card across the marble. "I'd like to review the guest list for Suite 1403 last night." "What?" The clerk's eyes widened. "I'm sorry, Mr. Ward, but guest privacy." A quiet voice interrupted from nearby. "You won't find it on paper." Ethan turned. A waitress stood holding a tray of empty glasses, her dark hair pulled into a loose knot. She looked barely out of college, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen more than she'd wanted to. "I worked last night," she said softly. "Suite 1403. Ethan's breath caught, and... She glanced around nervously before nodding toward a quieter corner. Ethan followed, every step measured, the marble floor beneath him echoing like a countdown. "I delivered champagne," she whispered, her voice trembling. Melissa Hart signed the check. She was with Adrian Cross. The name landed like a hammer blow. Adrian Cross, the slick investor who had hovered too close to Melissa at fundraisers, whose handshakes lingered just a beat too long. Ethan had dismissed the unease before, not anymore. The waitress continued, her eyes apologetic. "They weren't trying to hide it, not from each other anyway. I heard them talking." Ethan's chest tightened. "Talking about what?" She hesitated, then whispered, "You, about how you'd never believe it, about how once you were out, the company would be theirs." The words punched harder than any fist. Ethan forced his face to remain composed, though inside everything fractured. "Thank you," he said finally, pressing a generous tip into her hand. She tried to refuse, but he closed her fingers gently around the bills. "You didn't see me today." She nodded quickly, her eyes wide with sympathy, and hurried away. Ethan stood in the corner of the Astoria lobby, the truth heavy in his chest. Melissa hadn't just betrayed him personally. She had conspired against him, plotting with Adrian to take the empire his family had built. This wasn't about love, it was about power, and they had thought he would be too blind to see it. Back at his penthouse, Ethan sat at his desk, staring at the city he'd once viewed as conquerable. His phone buzzed again. Another message, same anonymous number. This time it wasn't a photo, it was a video. Melissa's voice unmistakable. "Once he's out, the empire is ours." Adrian's smooth reply, "Ward will crumble, and when he does, no one will question us." The clip was short, grainy, but real. Ethan replayed it until the edges of the screen blurred. Melissa's denial from the night before echoed bitterly in his memory. "There's nothing, Ethan. You're the man I love, the only man." Now he knew better. The rage inside him was no longer chaotic. It sharpened into clarity. Melissa and Adrian had underestimated him. They believed him too naive, too blinded by love to see the knives aimed at his back. But Ethan Ward was not weak. He reached for his phone, scrolling to Claire Donovan's name, his most trusted ally, his oldest friend in the company. If anyone could help him turn this betrayal into ammunition, it was her. He hesitated only once before pressing call. When she answered, her voice was brisk, professional. "Ethan, what has happened?" "I need you," he said. His tone was calm, but beneath it thrummed something darker. "Meet me tonight, and bring everything you have on Adrian Cross." There was a pause, then Claire's voice hardened. "I'll be there." Ethan hung up, his reflection staring back at him from the darkened screen. Not a man undone, but a man preparing for war. That evening, as the city pulsed with life, Melissa reclined in Adrian's penthouse, sipping champagne. She laughed lightly at something he whispered, but her eyes flickered with unease. For all her bravado, she knew Ethan too well. He was not a man who accepted betrayal quietly. "Relax," Adrian said smoothly, draping an arm around her. "Ward's finished. He just doesn't know it yet." "What?" Melissa forced a smile, but deep down, she felt the tremor of approaching consequences. And across town, Ethan Ward tightened his grip on the wheel of his car, determination blazing in his chest. The illusion of love had shattered. What remained was resolve. As Ethan parked outside Claire's office, his phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message lit up the screen. "You're getting close, but if you want to survive, stop digging." Attached was a still image, Ethan's penthouse photographed from across the street, his sanctuary violated. Ethan's jaw clenched. Whoever was behind this wasn't just exposing betrayal. They were watching him. The war wasn't just about Melissa anymore. It was about survival. The photograph glowed on Ethan Ward's phone screen, stark and unnerving. His penthouse, his sanctuary, captured from across the street. Whoever had sent the warning wasn't just feeding him information. They were watching him. For a moment, Ethan stood in the dim hush of his car, the hum of Manhattan traffic beyond the glass. His pulse thudded with a mix of rage and adrenaline. Melissa's betrayal had cracked his heart. Adrian's ambition had put his empire in jeopardy. But this was something else. Someone had drawn a target on his life. The message still lingered. "You're getting close, but if you want to survive, stop digging." He didn't stop digging. He tightened his grip on the phone, slid it into his pocket, and strode toward the steel and glass tower that housed Claire Donovan's office. Claire was already waiting, hunched over a laptop with half a dozen open files when Ethan entered. Her blazer was discarded on a chair, sleeves rolled up, hair pulled into a no-nonsense knot. She looked up as he closed the door behind him, her sharp eyes narrowing. "You look like hell," she said, no sympathy in her tone. Ethan tossed the phone onto her desk. The screen still displayed the photograph of his penthouse. "Because hell is parked outside my building." Claire's brows furrowed as she studied the image. "They're watching you, which means they're scared you'll find something." "They should be," Ethan said evenly. "I have enough to burn Melissa and Adrian both." He sat, his voice steady but edged. "But I want to know who's pulling the strings, who has the resources to follow me this closely." Claire tapped through files, her fingers precise. "Melissa and Adrian have motive. Adrian has money, but surveillance this clean, it feels corporate." Ethan leaned back, his jaw tightening. "Someone on the board." Claire met his eyes. "If that's true, the rot is deeper than we thought." She opened a folder revealing printouts of transactions. "I traced one of Adrian's shell accounts. Funds were transferred through a consultancy linked to Haverson." Ethan's stomach tightened at the name. Haverson, a board member with an immaculate public image and a talent for smiling in every press photo. A man who had toasted Ethan's engagement to Melissa. "You're sure?" Ethan asked. Claire nodded, positive. "If Adrian's the blade, Haverson's the hand holding it." Ethan exhaled slowly. The betrayal widened, swallowing more of the world he thought he knew. "Then it isn't just Melissa and Adrian, it's a coalition." "Exactly," Claire said, "and they're preparing something big. We need to move before they do." Hours bled away in the glow of computer screens. Claire pieced together threads of evidence, Ethan's mind sharpening with each revelation. The waitress's testimony, the photograph, the video of Melissa and Adrian plotting, and now the possibility of a board member feeding the conspiracy. But while Ethan strategized, Melissa and Adrian acted. That same night, headlines erupted across financial media. Ward & Co. Under fire, Heir allegedly misused foundation funds for lavish lifestyle. Anonymous sources claimed Ethan Ward funneled money through shell charities. The words were poison, spreading through social media within hours, amplified by every pundit eager for scandal. By dawn, Ethan's name trended worldwide, paired with images of yachts he had never owned and mansions he had never visited. At the penthouse, Ethan stood in front of the television, jaw clenched as one anchor declared, if true, this could spell the end of Ethan Ward's leadership ambitions before they even begin. Claire muted the screen with a sharp click. They moved faster than I expected. Ethan's voice was calm, but his eyes burned. They want me painted as a fraud before I can expose them. And they're good at it, Claire replied, but we can counterattack. That video you have Melissa and Adrian plotting, it's dynamite. Ethan shook his head, not yet. If we play it too early, they'll call it fake, smear the source, and bury it. We need timing. Claire studied him, then nodded. Then we bide our time, but understand this, Ethan, they're not just going after your company. They're going after you, your name, your freedom. If prosecutors take that headline seriously, you could be under investigation. Ethan didn't flinch. Then let them investigate. While they dig in my past, I'll dig in theirs. Across town, Melissa sat with Adrian in his sleek penthouse, her fingers wrapped nervously around a champagne flute. It's everywhere, she whispered, scrolling through headlines on her tablet. Ethan's name is ruined. Adrian smirked, pouring himself another glass. Not ruined, just redefined. By the time the board votes, he'll be a liability they can't afford, and liabilities are removed. Melissa hesitated, and if he fights back? Adrian's smile widened, sharp and cruel. He won't get the chance. By the time he moves, the trap will already be closed. Melissa tried to return his smile, but unease lingered in her chest. She had lied, betrayed, manipulated. But even she felt a chill when Adrian spoke, as though Ethan's fate was already sealed. Back in his penthouse, Ethan stood at the window as dawn painted the skyline gray. His reflection stared back, harder now, sharper. Not the man who had once believed Melissa's promises, but the man betrayal had forged. He turned to Claire. It's not just about defending myself anymore. It's about exposing them. If they want a war, I'll give them one. Claire lifted her glass of water in a grim toast. Then let's make it hurt. Ethan's phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. You're not the only one being watched. She is too. Attached was a photograph, Melissa, walking into Adrian's penthouse, her expression tense, almost fearful. For a moment, Ethan frowned, confusion flickering. The woman who had betrayed him might also be a prisoner of the very man she'd chosen. Melissa, he murmured, almost to himself. Claire's eyes narrowed. Don't tell me you're softening. Ethan shook his head slowly. No, but if Adrian turns on her, she could become our weakness or our weapon. He slipped the phone into his pocket, his resolve crystallizing. They want me buried, he said, but before this ends, the truth will bury them. The next morning, Ethan arrived at Ward & Co. headquarters to find chaos. Reporters clustered outside, shouting accusations, but it was the look on his secretary's face that froze him. Sir, she whispered, pale and shaken, federal investigators are here. They want to speak with you. Ethan's pulse steadied, cold and sharp. Adrian hadn't just launched a smear campaign. He had unleashed the law. And the war had entered its deadliest stage. The marble lobby of Ward & Co. had always been Ethan Ward's domain, a fortress of legacy, the beating heart of the empire his family built. This morning, it felt like enemy ground. Flashes from cameras outside still echoed in his mind, the shouted accusations of reporters trailing him up the steps. Now, inside, the atmosphere was no calmer. 2 federal agents in dark suits waited near the reception desk, clipboards in hand, their presence as disruptive as a siren. Mr. Ward, one of them asked as Ethan approached. His voice was polite, but the sharpness behind it left no doubt. We'd like to ask you a few questions regarding irregularities in your foundation's finances. Ethan nodded once, calm on the surface. Of course, my office. Claire was already there when he led the agents inside. She looked at him sharply but said nothing, taking a seat at the far end of the table. Ethan gestured for the men to sit. The taller of the two opened a folder. We've received allegations that millions of dollars earmarked for charitable initiatives were redirected into personal accounts tied to your name. That's impossible, That's impossible, Ethan replied evenly. I haven't touched a cent of those funds. Then you won't mind explaining why the audit logs show otherwise, the agent said, sliding documents across the table. Ethan scanned them, transfers, signatures, account numbers, all leading back to him. The work was meticulous, too meticulous. His jaw tightened. These records are fabricated. The agent's brow arched, a serious claim. It's also true, Ethan said. He pushed the documents back across the table. Ward & Co. runs on integrity. My family's name runs on it. Someone is trying to erase that by painting me as a thief. Whoever gave you this evidence is part of a conspiracy. The shorter agent leaned forward. Mr. Ward, if you're innocent, then you'll have no objection to cooperating fully. We'll need complete access to your accounts, your communications, your travel records. Ethan didn't flinch. You'll have them. The agents exchanged a glance, then stood. We'll be in touch. When they left, silence pressed down on the office like a weight. Claire broke it. They're playing their strongest card, Ethan. Adrian's fingerprints are all over this. If prosecutors buy it, you're not just fighting for your company, you're fighting for your freedom. Ethan walked to the window, hands gripping the sill. Then we make them choke on their own lies. The boardroom was another battlefield entirely. Directors sat stiffly, some avoiding his gaze, others looking at him with thinly veiled suspicion. Mr. Haverson, smooth as ever, leaned forward. Ethan, we respect your family name, but perception is reality. These allegations are out there, splashed across every paper, every channel. Investors are panicking. Our stock is down 7% in 24 hours. What? Because of lies, Ethan said coldly. Lies planted by Adrian Cross. Halvorsen spread his hands. Do you have proof? Not yet, but Ethan met his eyes with steady fire. I will. The room murmured, doubt thick in the air. Halvorsen's lips curved into a sympathetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. Until then, Ethan, you must understand the board's concern. We cannot let one man's scandal drag down the entire company. Claire stepped in sharply. With respect, what drags down this company is surrendering to rumors. Ethan has cooperated with investigators. He'll be cleared. Until then, destabilizing leadership is exactly what our enemies want. The directors shifted, uncertain. The session ended without resolution, but Ethan could feel the sand slipping through the hourglass. The board was leaning away from him, and Adrian's shadow was everywhere. That evening, the media spectacle reached its fever pitch. On primetime television, Melissa Hart appeared seated across from a celebrity anchor, dressed in white, her expression somber and delicate. I never wanted this, she said softly, her voice trembling just enough. But the truth had to come out. I was close to Ethan. I thought I knew him. But when I discovered what he was doing with the foundation funds, I realized I couldn't stay silent. The anchor lined in. Are you afraid of retaliation? Melissa let out a fragile laugh, brushing a tear. Of course, but I believe people deserve the truth. Ethan is powerful, but he's not untouchable. The audience watching across the country drank in every word. In his penthouse, Ethan stood in front of the television, fists clenched at his sides. Melissa's performance was flawless. Wounded lover, reluctant whistleblower. He switched off the screen before the rage inside him boiled over. She's not just lying, he said aloud. She's rewriting the story. Quote, Claire, sitting at the counter with her laptop, didn't look up. Then we write a better one, but first we need evidence, something undeniable. Ethan's phone buzzed, another message, same anonymous number. I told you to stop digging, you didn't listen, now they'll bury you. Attached was a new document, licked court papers, a subpoena. Ethan Ward named in a pending case for embezzlement. His pulse slowed, cold and measured. They're moving faster than we are. Claire finally looked up, her eyes sharp. Then we stop reacting, we go on offense. Across town, Adrian Cross poured himself another drink, his grin wide as Melissa's interview replayed on the television. Beautiful, he murmured, absolutely beautiful. The nation believes you. By the time Ethan realizes what hit him, his empire will be rubble. Melissa smiled faintly, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. And if he fights back? Adrian's grin hardened. He won't, not this time. Tomorrow the prosecutors move. And when they do, Ward won't have a company or a future. Melissa stared at her glass. Somewhere deep inside, unease coiled tighter. Back at the penthouse, Ethan leaned over Claire's desk as she pulled up encrypted files. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "Everything," she said. "Every contact, every lead, every scrap of data that ties Adrian to this conspiracy. We dig until we find the crack." Ethan's phone buzzed again, not anonymous this time. A name flashed across the screen. "Melissa." A message appeared. "Meet me. Alone. I can explain." Ethan stared at it, his reflection mirrored in the glass screen. Claire's eyes narrowed. "It's a trap." Ethan's voice was quiet, steady. "Maybe, but if she's breaking, this could be our opening." The next night, Ethan arrived at a quiet chapel on Lexington, the place Melissa had chosen for the meeting. Inside, she waited in the back pew, her hands shaking, her eyes rimmed with something that looked less like defiance and more like fear. When Ethan approached, she whispered, "You don't understand. Adrian isn't just after you. He's after everything. And if you don't stop him, none of us will survive." The words hung in the dim air, trembling with the possibility that the woman who had destroyed him might now be his only chance at victory. The chapel was dim, the faint glow of votive candles flickering against cold stone walls. Ethan Ward stood a few feet from the pew where Melissa sat, his presence rigid, like a soldier braced for attack. Melissa looked up at him, her face pale, her hands trembling. For the first time in weeks, she looked less like the polished woman who had smiled for cameras, and more like a fragile version of herself, stripped bare of pretense. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. Ethan's voice was low, controlled. "You asked me to." Her eyes darted toward the dark corners of the chapel, as if expecting shadows to move. "Adrian doesn't forgive mistakes. He knows I met you. If he finds out what I'm telling you—" "Then tell me something worth the risk," Ethan cut in, his tone sharp. "Because right now, all I see is the woman who lied to my face and tried to bury me." Melissa flinched. "I know I deserve that, but Adrian, he isn't just after Ward and Co. He's building something bigger, something dangerous." Ethan folded his arms, unmoved. "Enlighten me." Melissa leaned forward, her voice shaking. "The embezzlement charges, the fabricated audits, the likes, they're not just to ruin you. Adrian's plan is to destabilize Ward and Co. so completely that the board begs him to step in. Once he has control, he'll strip the company for parts. He's already lined up buyers overseas, people who will pay billions for slices of what every family built." Ethan's jaw tightened, but his face remained unreadable. "So he destroys me to profit from the corpse." Melissa nodded, tears welling. "I thought I was in control at first, that I could play both sides. But Adrian doesn't share power. He uses people until they're empty." Her voice broke. "And now he's using me." Ethan studied her closely, searching for deception. For years, he had believed every word she'd said. Tonight, he scrutinized every flicker in her eyes, every tremor in her tone. "You want me to believe you," he said finally. "I want you to survive," she whispered. "And maybe I want to survive too." Silence pressed heavy between them. Ethan turned, walking toward the altar. The stained glass above cast fractured colors across his face. "Do you know what you cost me, Melissa?" His voice was quiet, but it carried through the chapel. "Not just my company, my name, my future. You stood by Adrian while he painted me as a criminal, and you smiled while he bid it." Her tears spilled, then falling onto clasped hands. "I told myself it was survival, that if I chose him, I'd be safe, but I was wrong. Adrian doesn't leave survivors." "What?" Ethan turned back to her, his expression cut from stone. "So why now? Why betray him now?" Melissa's answer came barely audible. "Because I heard him talking. He doesn't need me anymore. Once the board votes, once you're ruined, I'm next." Ethan moved closer, standing over her. "You want protection." Melissa met his gaze, desperation in her eyes. "I'll testify. I'll hand over everything, the emails, the accounts, the meetings, but you have to promise me." "I don't promise liars anything," Ethan snapped. She flinched as though struck. For a long moment she said nothing, only breathing hard through the tremor of her tears. Then she pulled a flash drive from her coat pocket, her fingers shaking as she held it out. "This has recordings, Adrian bragging, making deals, laughing about how easy it was to frame you. I was supposed to destroy it. I couldn't." Ethan stared at it but didn't take it. Trusting her felt like stepping onto thin ice. "Why give this to me?" he asked. "Because if Adrian wins, there won't be a place left for me in this city," she whispered. "And because part of me still cares." The words hung there, bitter and fragile. Finally, Ethan took the drive, slipping it into his pocket. "If this is a trick, Melissa." "It's not," she said quickly. "You'll see." They sat in silence, the chapel heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. Then Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. An anonymous message. "You should have listened. She can't save you. She's already ours." Attached was a live photograph, Melissa in the chapel, sitting exactly where she was now. Ethan's pulse spiked. He turned sharply, scanning the darkened corners, the high balconies. Someone was here, watching. Melissa's breath hitched as she saw the photo. "No, no, Lou, no." Ethan grabbed her arm, pulling her to her feet. "We're leaving now." "What?" They rushed toward the heavy doors, but before they reached them, a sound split the air, the faint click of a camera shutter echoing through the nave. Melissa froze, terror flooding her face. "He knows. Adrian knows." Ethan's grip tightened, his voice hard. "Then let him, because I'm done playing his game." As Ethan pulled Melissa into the cold night air, his phone buzzed again. Another message. This time there was no photo, just words. "You can't protect her. Tomorrow she testifies, and when she does, you'll be finished." Ethan's eyes burned as he pocketed the phone. Adrian had just declared the next battlefield. And it would be war in the courtroom. The courthouse was a fortress of cold marble and hushed whispers. By morning, reporters had flooded the steps outside, their cameras flashing as though each photograph could carve Ethan Ward's downfall into stone. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation. The case was still preliminary, but the stakes couldn't have been higher. Embezzlement, fraud, betrayal. Words that clung to Ethan's name in headlines. And now, the woman who had once been his fiancée was about to take the stand. Claire walked beside him through the crowded corridor, her expression taut. "The flash drive could change everything," she murmured, "but only if Melissa doesn't crumble up there." Ethan's jaw tightened. "She's already chosen her side once. Let's see if she can survive choosing it again." The courtroom buzzed with subdued energy. Prosecutors shuffled papers, their eyes sharp as knives. Adrian Cross sat at the back, polished and smug, his presence a silent threat. His hand rested casually on his cane, an accessory he didn't need but used like a weapon, a signal of control. Melissa Hart entered quietly, escorted by marshals. Her face was pale, but her poise was immaculate. She glanced briefly toward Ethan, then away, as though their history was too heavy to meet head-on. The judge, an older man with weary eyes, called the session to order. "Bring in the witness." Melissa stepped to the stand. The oath sounded hollow as she repeated it. The prosecutor began smoothly. "Miss Hart, you were in a relationship with Mr. Ethan Ward, correct?" "Yes," Melissa said, her voice steady though her hands gripped the edge of the stand. "And during this relationship, you became aware of irregularities in his foundation's financial dealings." Melissa's throat worked. "At first I thought they were mistakes, then I realized they weren't. Money was being diverted, millions, and Ethan was the one signing off." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Ethan's face remained still, but inside the words cut deep, not because they surprised him, but because Melissa spoke them as though rehearsed. Claire leaned toward him. "She's following Adrian's script." Well, then came the defense's turn. Ethan's attorney stood, his voice cool. "Miss Hart, you claim Ethan Ward embezzled funds. Do you have direct evidence of this?" Melissa faltered. "I saw documents, transfers." The attorney nodded. "Documents provided by Adrian Cross." Melissa hesitated. Her eyes flickered toward the back of the room where Adrian sat, expression calm, lips curved in the faintest smile. "Yes," she whispered. The attorney pressed. "So your entire claim rests on evidence handed to you by the man who stands to gain if Ethan Ward falls." A ripple of unease spread. Adrian's smile never wavered. Then came the twist. The prosecutor stood again, waving the folder. "Your Honor, the state has obtained new material evidence." Claire stiffened. Ethan's gaze sharpened. The prosecutor handed it to the judge, then displayed it on the courtroom monitor. An email chain, allegedly from Ethan to offshore bankers, authorizing the transfer of foundation funds. Gasps filled the room. Ethan's stomach clenched. He knew instantly forgeries, perfectly crafted, damning forgeries. Melissa's eyes whitened as she looked at the screen. Her lips parted, whispering, "That's not." She stopped herself, glancing back at Adrian. The prosecutor turned to her. "Miss Hart, does this refresh your memory?" Melissa swallowed hard. Yes, I remember now. He sent those. Her voice cracked. Ethan caught the tremor not of conviction, but of fear. Claire leaned close, whispering fiercely, "She's lying because she has to. Adrian's controlling her." The judge called for order. The prosecutor continued the assault, framing Ethan as a man who lived off stolen charity funds, who manipulated those closest to him. Every word twisted Ethan's legacy, every forged email sealing the coffin Adrian had built. When the session broke for recess, Ethan rose, the weight of the courtroom pressing down like chains. Outside the chamber, Melissa slipped into a side hall, her shoulders shaking. Ethan followed, catching her by the arm. "Look at me," he said, voice low and cutting. Melissa's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want to say it, but Adrian, he has people watching me everywhere. If I don't follow his lead, I'm dead." "You just swore under oath," Ethan hissed. "You buried me to save yourself." Melissa clutched his sleeve, desperation in her touch. "The drive I gave you, that's the real truth. Use it, please. Don't let him win." Claire appeared, pulling Ethan back. "Don't waste breath," she made her choice. But Ethan's eyes stayed locked on Melissa. There was fear there, yes, but also something else. Regret. The afternoon session resumed, but the momentum was clear. Prosecutors hammered their narrative. The forged emails painted Ethan guilty, Melissa's testimony confirmed it, and the press outside was already salivating at the story. When court adjourned, Ethan walked out to a swarm of cameras. Questions flew. Did you steal millions? How do you answer Melissa Hart's testimony? Ethan ignored them, sliding into his car with Claire. His jaw was set, his hands steady, but his mind churned. "They've stacked the deck," Claire muttered. "If we don't use that flash drive soon, you're finished." Ethan stared out the window. "Not yet. If we reveal it too early, Adrian buries it. We need the perfect moment." Claire frowned. "And if we don't get one?" Ethan's gaze hardened. "And we make one." Across town, Adrian toasted with board members in his penthouse, Melissa seated silently beside him. "To inevitability," Adrian said, his grin sharp. "By the end of the week, Ethan Ward will be nothing more than a cautionary tale." Melissa sipped her champagne, her hand trembling. Adrian didn't notice or didn't care. Late that night, Ethan sat in his penthouse, the flash drive Melissa had given him burning a hole in his pocket. His phone buzzed, another anonymous message. "Tomorrow, new charges, felony counts, prison time unless you disappear." Attached was a single chilling image, Ethan's prison intake photo, already mocked. His knuckles went white. "They want me erased," he whispered. Then he looked at Claire, his eyes blazing with resolve. "Then it's time we fight dirty." The mock prison photo still glowed on Ethan Ward's phone, a grotesque glimpse of the future Adrian Cross had designed for him. He set the device down, his reflection in the darkened window staring back, harder now than ever before. "They think they've already buried me," Ethan said quietly. "Then it's time we dig them out." Claire leaned against the desk, her arms crossed. "You mean using the drive Melissa gave you?" "Not yet," Ethan replied. He pulled the small flash drive from his pocket, twirling it between his fingers. "This is the bullet that kills Adrian's empire. But if we fire too soon, it ricochets and dies in the noise. We need a first strike, something sharp enough to cut, but not enough to reveal our full hand." Claire raised an eyebrow. "You want to wound him before you finish him." Ethan's lips curved in the faintest hint of a smile. "Exactly." By morning, whispers began rippling across financial circles. A leak, subtle, targeted, slipped into the bloodstream of the press. Not enough to expose Adrian outright, but enough to seed doubt. Anonymous sources allege irregularities in Adrian Cross's offshore accounts. Could the man poised to replace Ethan Ward face skeletons of his own? On social media, hashtags began to shift. Adrian, once the knight in shining armor of Ward & Co., suddenly appeared tarnished. In his penthouse, Adrian slammed a glass onto the counter as the news anchor spoke his name with suspicion. "Impossible, that's impossible." Melissa sat on the couch, her expression unreadable. "Looks like someone's digging into you now." Adrian turned sharply, eyes blazing. "You think this is funny? It's Ethan. It has to be. He's striking back." Melissa looked down at her glass. Quietly, almost too quietly, she said, "Maybe you underestimated him." Meanwhile, Ethan and Claire watched the coverage from his penthouse. Claire allowed herself the faintest smirk. "It's working. He's rattled." Ethan nodded, though his eyes remained cold. Rattled isn't enough, he'll retaliate, and when he does, we'll be ready. As if on cue, Ethan's phone buzzed. Another anonymous message. You've drawn blood, now make him bleed out. Check your inbox. Ethan opened his laptop. A new encrypted file sat in his email, banking records, wire transfers, dates, and amounts all tied to Adrian Cross. The sums were massive, funneled through shell companies linked to foreign buyers. Claire lined in, her eyes widening. This is it. Proofy selling pieces of Ward & Co. before he even has control. Oh, Ethan frowned, and it came from our ghost again. Whoever's feeding us this wants Adrian destroyed as badly as we do. Claire's voice was cautious. Or they want to use you to do their dirty work. Don't forget that. Ethan closed the laptop. Motives don't matter. Truth does. We use this. That afternoon, Ethan made his move. Through back channels, the documents reached an investigative journalist at the Chronicle, a reporter known for tearing apart Wall Street icons. By evening, the headline blazed across the internet. Adrian Cross offshore empire exposed, billions in questionable deals. The story spread like wildfire. Adrian's carefully built reputation began to crack. Investors whispered. Board members exchanged nervous calls. In a quiet boardroom, Haverson paced, his face pale. This wasn't supposed to happen. Adrian was supposed to be untouchable. Adrian slammed his fist onto the table. Ward thinks he's clever. He's playing dirty. Fine, two can play. What? Haverson looked uneasy. What are you suggesting? Adrian leaned forward, his voice like venom. If Ward wants war, we'll give him a massacre. Ethan, however, wasn't celebrating. He sat with Claire, staring at the flash drive Melissa had given him. This drive can end him, Claire said. Between the leaks and this, he's cornered. Ethan shook his head slowly. A cornered man is dangerous. Adrian won't just fight back. He'll scorch the earth. Claire frowned. Then what's the play? Ethan's gaze hardened. We tighten the noose, but we don't pull it yet. Let him make his boldest move, then we hang him with it. That night, Melissa found herself summoned to Adrian's penthouse. The room felt colder than usual, the air sharp with tension. Adrian poured himself a drink, his smile thin. You testified beautifully, but now a Ward is clawing back, and I need to know, are you with me, Melissa? Her throat went dry. Of course. Adrian's gaze cut through her. Because if you're not, if you so much as think of wavering, understand this. Ethan isn't the only one who can be destroyed. He handed her a tablet. On the screen was surveillance footage. Melissa leaving the chapel the night before with Ethan. Her heart stopped. Adrian's smile widened. So you'll forgive me if I keep you on a tighter leash, betray me again, and the world sees this, and then both of you burn. Melissa forced a nod, though inside her chest screamed. Meanwhile, Ethan and Claire strategized late into the night. Their walls were lined with printouts, documents, photographs, a war room built on betrayal. Claire rubbed her temples. The journalist's piece bought us momentum, but Adrian's not down. He's already planning his counter. Ethan nodded. Good, let him. The bigger his move, the harder he'll fall. His phone buzzed again. Another message from the anonymous source. Tomorrow, watch the market. Adrian will strike. Be ready. What? Attached was a single image. Adrian shaking hands with a foreign magnate known for hostile takeovers. Claire's eyes widened. He's going to trigger a crash. He'll tank Ward & Co.'s value and swoop in for the krill. Ethan's jaw set, his voice quiet but resolute. Then tomorrow we take the fight public. The next morning, chaos erupted. Ward & Co. stock plummeted, bleeding billions in hours. Reporters screamed about Adrian positioning himself as the savior ready to buy the pieces. But then came the shock. Adrian himself appeared live on national television, flanked by lawyers holding a sheaf of papers. Ethan Ward is not just guilty of fraud, Adrian declared smoothly. He's guilty of treason. He has funneled company secrets overseas, and here's the proof. The screen filled with documents bearing Ethan's signature, forgeries, but devastating ones. In the penthouse, Ethan and Claire stared at the broadcast, the walls closing in. They've just turned you, Claire whispered, from a businessman into a traitor. The television screen glowed like a guillotine blade. Adrian Cross stood tall, sleek in his tailored suit, his voice calm and venomous as he announced the latest blow. Ethan Ward, Adrian declared to the nation, is not simply guilty of fraud. He has funneled proprietary secrets overseas. He has endangered our markets. He has betrayed America itself. The screen filled with paper transfers, confidential memos, all forged, all branded with Ethan's signature. Across living rooms and boardrooms, headlines screamed, "Ward the traitor." Ethan stood in his penthouse, fists clenched so tight his nails cut into his palms. Claire muted the screen before Adrian's smirk could push him over the edge. "They've turned you," she said quietly, "from a greedy heir into a traitor." Ethan's jaw flexed, his voice steady but dark. "He wants me erased. Prison isn't enough. He wants my name burned into ash." Claire met his gaze. "Then maybe it's time we burn him first." For the rest of the day, Ethan moved like a man inside a storm. Reporters swarmed the street below. Investors called nonstop, panic dripping through every conversation. Ward & Co. stock plummeted as fear spread like wildfire. In the boardroom, directors shouted over one another. Heverson banged a gavel, demanding silence. "We can't ignore this. Ethan Ward is toxic. Unless he clears his name immediately, we vote him out." Ethan sat silent at the head of the table, his stare icy. "You want proof. You'll have it tomorrow." Heverson smirked faintly. "Proof or another excuse." Ethan didn't answer. He rose, leaving the boardroom in stunned silence. That night, Melissa stood at her apartment window, staring at the city with haunted eyes. Adrian's threats echoed in her mind, the chapel footage, the warning that he could destroy her too. She wrapped her arms around herself, trembling. A knock at the door startled her. When she opened it, Ethan stood there, the weight of the world in his eyes. She hesitated. "If Adrian knows you're here." "Then let him," Ethan cut in, stepping inside. His voice was sharp but not cruel. "You gave me the drive. Does it hold enough to crush him?" Melissa swallowed hard. "Yes, more than enough. His offshore deals, his blackmail, his control of board members, it's all on there." "Then why hasn't he destroyed you already?" Ethan asked. Her voice cracked. "Because he enjoys it, holding me on a leash, making me lie in court, making me betray the only man I ever—" She stopped herself, tears brimming. Ethan looked at her, pain flickering across his hardened expression. "If you're lying again, Melissa, I'll know." She met his eyes, desperate. "I'm not. Please, Ethan, end him. End this." Later, Ethan and Claire sat in the glow of monitors, the flash drive finally plugged into a laptop. The files unfolded like a labyrinth of corruption. Recordings of Adrian laughing about framing Ethan, bank transfers proving offshore deals, emails between Adrian and Heverson plotting to dismantle Ward & Co. Claire exhaled slowly. "This isn't just dynamite, this is nuclear." Ethan leaned back, eyes shadowed. "Then tomorrow we drop it." Before Claire could respond, Ethan's phone buzzed. Another anonymous message. "Why wait? Every second you delay, he destroys more of you. Release it now." Attached was a photo, Ethan's mother's grave, a bouquet of black lilies laid across it. Claire paled. "They're not just watching you, they're sending a message." Ethan's eyes darkened, but his voice was calm. "Good, let them watch. Tomorrow they'll see everything." Across the city, Adrian paced his penthouse, fury simmering beneath his polished mask. Heverson sat nearby, sipping brandy. "The markets are crashing," Heverson said, "but so far it's working. Ward looks like a traitor. He won't survive this." Adrian's smile was thin. "Unless he's stupid enough to fight back, and if he does, I have something prepared." He tapped a folder on the table, its contents hidden. "By the time Ward tries to defend himself, the world will see he's nothing but a criminal clawing for air." Melissa sat silently in the corner, her hands clasped tight. She didn't dare ask what was in the folder. She didn't want to know. The next morning, Ethan stood before a bank of cameras. His suit was immaculate, his expression carved from stone. Claire stood at his side, Melissa just behind, pale but resolute. Reporters clamored, their voices a storm. Ethan raised a hand, silencing them. "You've heard lies," he said, his voice steady and commanding. "Lies of fraud, lies of treason, lies planted by men who seek to destroy my family's legacy and this company's future. Today those lies die." He nodded to Claire, who connected the flash drive to the system. Screens behind Ethan lit up with recordings, Adrian's voice, clear and damning. "Ward won't see it coming. Once he's painted a thief, the company is ours. The board will beg us to step in. We'll strip it for billions." Gasps filled the room. Reporters shouted. Cameras flashed. Melissa's tears slipped free as Adrian's voice thundered through the speakers, his arrogance immortalized. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt the tide shift. The truth was out. But then chaos. The screen suddenly went black. Static filled the air. Then a new video appeared. Not Adrian. Ethan. The footage showed him in a dimly lit room, exchanging envelopes with a foreign businessman. Money, signatures, betrayal. Ethan froze. Claire's face drained of color. Reporters erupted, shouting, shoving forward. "Mr. Ward, how do you explain this?" Melissa's hand covered her mouth, horror in her eyes. Ethan stared at the screen. He knew instantly. Deepfake, expertly crafted, but the world wouldn't care. Adrian had struck back. As security struggled to calm the chaos, Ethan's phone buzzed one last time. Another anonymous message. "Your move, Ward, but remember, the world believes what it sees." Ethan pocketed the phone, his expression cold, unbroken. "They think this ends me," he murmured. "It hasn't even begun." The room dissolved into chaos. Reporters surged forward, their voices overlapping like thunder. "Mr. Ward, is that you in the video? Did you sell secrets overseas?" Cameras flashed, the glow of accusation searing into Ethan's face. Claire yanked the flash drive from the system, but the damage was done. The damning footage lingered on every screen, replaying in loops, each repetition carving another wound into Ethan's reputation. Ethan lifted a hand, trying to steady the room. "That video is fake. It's a fabrication." The reporters ignored him. The narrative had already taken root. Melissa stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "It is fake. Adrian created it. He's been manipulating." But no one listened. To the world, Melissa Hart was a scorned woman, a tainted witness. Her words carried no weight. Security swept Ethan, Claire, and Melissa out of the room, shielding them from the onslaught of cameras. Outside, sirens wailed as the city absorbed the scandal. Back in the penthouse, Claire slammed her laptop onto the table, her fingers flaring across the keys. "I'm running a forensic analysis now. If this deepfake is as clean as it looks, we'll need serious tech muscle to prove it's fake." Ethan poured himself a glass of water, his movements measured, deliberate. "By the time we prove it, Adrian will already have what he wants." Melissa stood by the window, arms wrapped tightly around herself. "The board," she whispered. "He's pushing for a vote. Once they believe the video, you're out permanently." Claire looked up. "How do you know that?" Melissa turned, her eyes haunted. "Because Adrian told me. He said tomorrow the board will choose, and when they do, Ward and Co. will be his." The words settled over the room like ash. Ethan's jaw hardened. "Then tomorrow is where we fight." But tonight the world was already judging. News anchors dissected the footage with grim certainty. Experts analyzed body language, convinced of Ethan's guilt. Talk shows mocked him. Late-night hosts painted him as the privileged heir caught in his own corruption. Stock plummeted further. Sponsors pulled out. Ward and Co.'s empire groaned under the weight of suspicion. Ethan watched the coverage in silence, his face unreadable. Claire sat beside him, her voice low. "They've weaponized perception. Truth doesn't matter anymore, only what people believe." Ethan finally spoke. "Then we make them believe something else." The anonymous messenger struck again. A ping lit Ethan's phone. "The video is fake. You know it, I know it, but proof is buried. If you want it, follow the trail. Tomorrow, board vote. Your last chance." Attached was a map, a storage facility on the outskirts of the city. A unit number. "This could be our shot. If Adrian stored raw footage or files proving the deepfake, we can expose him." Melissa's voice shook. "It's also a trap. He's expecting you to go." Ethan pocketed the phone, his eyes steady. "Then we walk into the trap, because if we don't, Adrian wins." That night sleep was a stranger. Ethan sat in the dark, staring at the city below, the hum of Manhattan vibrating like a battlefield before dawn. Melissa approached quietly, her expression fragile. "Ethan," she whispered, "if you lose tomorrow, you won't just lose the company. You'll lose everything, your freedom, your future." He didn't look at her. "Then I don't lose." Melissa hesitated, then stepped closer. "I'm sorry for everything. I thought Adrian was power, but he's poison, and I let him poison me too." "What?" For the first time, Ethan's eyes softened, but only slightly. "Regret doesn't undo betrayal." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "No, but maybe it can help fuel redemption." Ethan said nothing, but the silence between them felt less like ice and more like fragile truce. At dawn, Ethan and Claire drove to the storage facility, the city receding behind them. Melissa insisted on coming, though Claire shot her wary glances. The unit was tucked at the end of a dim corridor. Ethan slid the keycard through the lock, heart pounding. The door creaked open to reveal a small, cluttered space, old servers, dusty boxes, hard drives stacked carelessly. Clark exhaled. This is it. This is where he's keeping it. Ethan stepped forward, scanning the room. His eyes landed on a monitor in the corner, glowing faintly. A video loop played on it, raw footage, the deepfake in its earliest stages. Prova. Claire rushed to the computer, plugging in her drive. Give me 2 minutes, I'll pull everything. But then footsteps. A shadow filled the doorway. Adrian crossed, flanked by 2 men in black suits. His smile was slow, poisonous. Well, well, he drawled. The rat sniffed out the cheese. Ethan stepped in front of Claire and Melissa, his voice cold. You've gone too far, Adrian. Adrian's laugh echoed in the storage unit. Too far, Ethan. I've only just begun. Tomorrow the board votes. When they do, you'll be nothing, a ghost, a traitor, a man who once thought he could beat me. He leaned closer, his grin widening. And tonight, I erased the last shred of your fight. Before Ethan could respond, Adrian snapped his fingers. The 2 men surged forward. A scuffle erupted, metal clanging, shouts filling the cramped unit. Claire screamed as the monitor toppled, sparks flying. Melissa grabbed Ethan's arm, terror in her eyes. And then the screen went black, the raw footage lost to flames. Ethan's heart hammered as smoke curled through the air, proof their weapon gone. Adrian stepped back, brushing dust from his suit. Checkmate. He turned to Lave, his voice echoing. See you at the board vote, Ward. Ethan stood amid the wreckage, fury burning through his veins. The drive was gone, but his resolve was unbroken. The war wasn't over. It was only about to reach its deadliest battlefield. The smell of burnt wires lingered in the air long after Adrian's footsteps faded from the storage unit. Smoke curled upward, blackening the ceiling, the ruined monitor sparking its last breath. Ethan Ward stood among the wreckage, his fists clenched at his sides. Proof, the one weapon that could have shredded Adrian's lies, was gone. Claire knelt by the smoldering remains of the hard drive, coughing through the haze. It's useless, she said bitterly. He destroyed it. We've got nothing. Melissa pressed a trembling hand against the wall for support, her face pale. Adrian always plans for contingencies. He knew we'd find this place. He wanted to break you. What? Ethan turned, his voice low but sharp. He hasn't broken me yet. Back at the penthouse, silence weighed heavy as the city pulsed beyond the glass. Claire worked furiously at her laptop, scanning through fragments salvaged from the damaged drive. Lines of corrupted code scrolled past. There's nothing here. It's over. Ethan stood by the window, shoulders taut. Number Adrian thinks destroying one copy erases the truth, but men like him always keep backups, insurance. Melissa spoke, her voice trembling but urgent. He does. Adrian keeps a private vault, not digital, physical. He calls it the Ark, contracts, blackmail, recordings. Everything he can't risk online, he hides there. Claire's head snapped up, rear. Melissa hesitated, fear flickering in her eyes. In the Ward & Co. building, sublevel 3, he bragged once that hiding evidence under Ethan Ward's nose was the perfect irony. Ethan turned, his eyes blazing with renewed fire. Then that's where we strike, tomorrow. Before the vote. But the night stretched long, filled with ghosts. Ethan sat alone in his study, staring at the headlines that smeared his name across every screen. Traitor, fraud, fallen heir. The anonymous messenger pinged again. You're not finished. The Ark is real. Get there before the board votes and Adrian's empire collapses. For the first time, the message included a signature, a friend. Ethan leaned back, the pieces clicking. Whoever this friend was, they weren't neutral. They had orchestrated every breadcrumb, every leak, helping him, yes, but guiding him like a pawn on a chessboard. Claire entered, studying his expression. Message again. Ethan nodded. They know about the Ark. They want us to use it. Do you trust them? She asked him. Ethan's jaw tightened. I don't trust anyone, not anymore. But if Adrian has proof locked away, we're taking it. The following morning, the Ward & Co. tower loomed like a citadel under siege. Reporters swarmed the steps, shouting questions as Ethan strode through the revolving doors. Claire and Melissa flanked him, their faces pale but determined. Inside, security buzzed with tension. The board vote was only hours away. If Adrian won, Ethan's legacy ended here. But first, the Heir. Melissa guided them to the sublevels where concrete walls hummed with the low thrum of generators. The corridors were empty, sterile. She led them to a steel door with a biometric lock. "This is it," she whispered. Claire's eyes darted nervously. "How do we get in?" Melissa glanced at Ethan. "Adrian's print won't work, but yours might. He designed it that way to mock you." Ethan stepped forward, pressing his palm to the scanner. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside, shelves lined the walls, boxes, ledgers, drives, photographs, a museum of secrets. Claire's breath caught. Good God, this could bury half the city. Ethan scanned quickly, his hands steady despite the weight of it all. Then he saw it, a folder marked Cross Offshore Holdings. Inside, documents identical to the forged ones Adrian had planted against him, but annotated in Adrian's own handwriting. Melissa pulled another file, her hands trembling. "Here, recordings, his meetings with Haverson, bribes, blackmail, it's all here." Ethan's chest tightened with grim satisfaction. This is enough to end him. But as they gathered the evidence, footsteps echoed down the hall. Voices. Claire's eyes widened. Security. They scrambled, shoving files into bags. Ethan grabbed the recordings, Melissa the ledgers. Claire pulled the flash drives from the shelves. The steel door burst open. Guards flooded in, weapons raised. "Drop everything," one barked. Ethan straightened, his voice cold. "You're protecting a traitor. When this comes out, you'll fall with him." The guards hesitated, but only for a second. They moved forward. Melissa clutched Ethan's arm, terror in her eyes. "We can't fight them all." Claire whispered urgently, "The evidence, don't let it go." Moments later, they burst into the main lobby, alarms wailing behind them. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing as Ethan strode forward, carrying the bag of evidence. Security shouted, chaos erupted. Adrian appeared at the top of the marble staircase, flanked by board members. His smile was sharp, cruel. "Look at him," Adrian called out to the press. "Caught stealing from his own building. What better proof do you need?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters scribbled furiously, spinning it right here in real time. Ethan stood tall, his voice cutting through the noise. "No, I'm not stealing. I'm saving this company from the man who would destroy it. And when the board votes today, they'll see the truth." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "Then let's vote." The boardroom doors swung open. Members filed in, their faces tense, the weight of history pressing on their shoulders. Reporters pressed against the glass outside, desperate for a glimpse. Ethan walked in last, the bag of evidence slung over his shoulder like a warrior carrying his weapons to battle. Claire and Melissa trailed behind, silent sentinels. At the head of the table, Adrian smiled like a king awaiting coronation. "Gentlemen, ladies," he purred, "today we choose the future." Ethan set the bag on the table with a heavy thud. His voice was steady, sharp as a blade. "And today," he said, "we expose the lies." The room fell silent. The vote was about to begin. The boardroom was a cathedral of power, glass walls, polished oak, and the heavy hush of men and women who knew fortunes could be made or destroyed in an instant. At the head of the long table sat Adrian Cross, immaculate as ever, his cane resting casually beside him. His smile carried the certainty of victory. Ethan Ward placed the leather bag on the polished wood with deliberate force. The echo reverberated through the chamber like a war drum. Claire slid into the chair beside him, her laptop ready. Melissa stood just behind, her hands clasped tightly, her face pale but resolved. Havorson cleared his throat, gavel in hand. "We are here to vote on the removal of Ethan Ward as CEO of Ward & Co. All in favor." "Not yet," Ethan's voice cut through the room. Strong, steady. "You'll hear the truth first." Adrian chuckled softly. "Always the dramatist. Very well, Ethan. Entertain us before you're escorted out." Ethan opened the bag and spread the contents across the table. Ledgers, flash drives, annotated documents. The board members leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "These," Ethan said, "are not my crimes. They are Adrian's. Offshore accounts, blackmail, forged documents. He didn't just try to take this company. He tried to rewrite reality." "What?" He nodded to Claire, who connected a drive to the projector. Screens flickered alive, filling the glass walls with damning words and voices. Adrian's voice recorded in cold arrogance. "Ward won't see it coming. Once he's painted a thief, the company is ours." Another clip. "Haverson's vote is bought. He'll do what I say. They all will." Gasps spread through the board, Averson's face drained of color. Ethan turned his gaze on him. Bought, wasn't it? You betrayed this company for a seat at Adrian's table. Halvorsen stammered, This is fabricated. Melissa's voice rang clear. No, it's real. I saw him take the money. I saw Adrian orchestrate everything, and I lied under oath to protect myself. Her hands trembled, but her chin lifted. Not anymore. The room fell silent, the weight of her words slamming into every corner. Adrian's smile never faltered, touching. But really, do you expect them to take the word of a disgraced woman and a desperate man? The video is already out there. The world has seen Ethan Ward sell secrets overseas. That is truth. Ethan leaned forward, his eyes sharp. Truth isn't what you forge, Adrian. It's what you can't erase. Claire tapped her keyboard. A new video filled the screen's raw footage, pulled from the salvaged files of Adrian's arc. The deepfake in its earliest form. Adrian's technician stitching Ethan's face onto another man's body. Adrian's voice directing them, make it seamless. The world must believe. The board members gasped. One whispered, my God. Adrian's mask cracked. For the first time, his smile faltered. Ethan's voice rang like steel. You framed me with lies, but you left your fingerprints all over the process, and now everyone sees them. Adrian rose suddenly, his cane slamming against the floor. This is a farce. Ward manipulated the files. This is his trick. But Melissa stepped forward, her voice steady. No, I was there. I saw him create it. I saw him order it. Her eyes glistened as she looked at Ethan. I betrayed you once. I won't again. This is the truth. The board erupted in murmurs, shock, disbelief, anger. Haverson tried to speak, but another recording silenced him, his own voice, taking bribes, promising loyalty to Adrian. His shoulders slumped. The tide had turned. Adrian's last weapon was rage. He slammed his fists onto the table. You think this saves you, Ward? You think this board will stand with a man who let me get this close? You're weak, you're sentimental. That's why you'll always lose. Ethan stood slowly, his presence filling the room. No, Adrian, I win because I'm not you, because I don't need fear and lies to hold power. This company was built on my family's legacy, and I'll burn before I let you poison it. For a long moment, silence. The weight of Ethan's words hung heavy. Then the chairman spoke. We've heard enough. It's time to vote. One by one, hands rose. Board members who had whispered in Adrian's ear now turned away, their faces grim. Ethan Ward remains CEO, the chairman declared. Adrian Cross is hereby expelled from this board. The gavel struck. Adrian froze, his empire crumbling before his eyes, his smile twisted into a snarl. You'll regret this, all of you. Security moved in. For the first time, Adrian looked small, dragged from the room, his cane clattering against the floor, his power stripped away. Melissa exhaled shakily, tears sliding down her cheeks. Claire closed her laptop, her shoulders sagging in relief. Ethan stood tall, though the weight of weeks of war still clung to him. Outside, the press erupted as Adrian was escorted in handcuffs, his downfall flashing across every screen. Ethan stepped to the podium, cameras blazing. His voice was calm, resolute. The truth has prevailed. Ward & Co. will endure not through lies or fear, but through integrity. Adrian Cross tried to rewrite reality, but reality cannot be bought. Reporters shouted questions, but Ethan didn't linger. He turned, walking back into the building with Claire and Melissa. In the quiet that followed, the three of them stood together in the boardroom, the war finally over. Melissa spoke softly. I don't deserve forgiveness, but thank you for letting me help and do what I caused. Ethan studied her, the hurt still deep, but tempered now by hard-earned clarity. You can't change the past, Melissa, but you can choose what you do with tomorrow. She nodded, tears falling freely. Claire touched Ethan's arm gently. It's over, you won. Ethan's gaze drifted to the city skyline, the sun breaking through storm clouds. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself a breath that felt whole. No, he said quietly, we survived. Winning comes after rebuilding. The war was done, the lies exposed. Adrian Cross was finished, his empire reduced to rubble of his own making. Ethan Ward stood scarred but unbroken, not just an heir, not just a survivor, but a man who had faced betrayal, ruin, and deception, and still held on to something Adrian never could, the truth. And as the city moved on, Ethan knew his story wasn't one of downfall, but of resurrection. The final reckoning had passed, the future, though